Good evening and welcome back to Mississippi University for Women's Low Residency, MFA in Creative Writing, Full Residency, reading number 4. For those of you who are keeping track, I believe we started on Thursday. We are now halfway or maybe a little over halfway through the full residency. Yay! Those of you who started short residency with me last week, we're probably 2/3 of the way. But we have more exciting nights of readings coming up, including tonight, when our featured readers will be faculty member Brandy Wilson and thesis reader Alasdair Rivers, who successfully defended this afternoon. Our full residency student readers, starting them out, will be Bev Heasley and Gwynn Vance.
Okay. Bev Heasley. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. This is my next to the last semester. I'll graduate in December. As I think I said the other night, the commencement is December 11th. It's the day after my 88th birthday. I was in a forms class with Mary this past semester, and we were reading short stories that I can't believe some of them. I would never have chosen these authors. I probably wouldn't have read them if I hadn't had to. But I learned. I keep learning. Again, they were really far out for me. And one of the assignments was to write a piece kind of in that style. Which was a real challenge for me because it's not anything the way I usually do. So this is my piece, and it's called Not Me. Claire parked her Honda in the crowded hospital employee lot just as daybreak began to break through the night sky. Day shift. Barely awake after a short night's sleep, it took a minute for the crowd gathered at the hospital front to register on her sluggish brain. Ah, yes, birthday. She got so exhausted last night explaining why she would not marry him that she forgot the importance of the day. Tumultuous crowd at the entrance to the lobby, laughing, singing, phones out taking pictures, news trucks and cameras on the ready to send the miraculous event to the world. Showed the excitement of the occasion. Today is a birthday, I wonder for whom, sang out one group of employees who entered the hospital through the employee-only door next to the time clock. Claire turned to the nurse waiting in line behind her. Wow, who would have thought that there'd be this much excitement over the birth of a baby? Oh, 5:55, time clock punching. Oh, 600, at the locker, gathering stethoscope, tape, scissors, standard nurse equipment for the day. Claire, you look done in, and the shift's just beginning. I am. We had a terrible row last night. He just can't accept but I won't marry him. He keeps pushing me. I've explained that it's my body, my choice, and I don't want to be a mother. And marriage now means motherhood. I know. The newest laws stipulate that a child goes with the license. It's a terrible way to force procreation. The soft sell of women returning to the traditional family didn't work. Neither did paying women to reproduce to raise the census. You forgot about making abortion a criminal offense. Birth control protections are being outlawed. The government is determined to force women to have babies. Claire went on down the hall, muttering to herself, "It won't happen to me. I won't be a mother." Oh, 6:30, rounds begin. 3 women are in labor. One is in the delivery room. Claire soothes the fears of a teenager having her first baby. "I needed the money," she cried between contractions. Shaking her head, scurrying to the nurse's station to chart progress, but not me. Not for anything will I be a mother. Tension is high as the staff begins preparations for the big event. "Who is on the delivery team?" Claire asked the head nurse. "We've been working on this project for 9 months, all of us sharing responsibility for the child's development, health, and welfare. I'm sure the AI team will once say, I'm sure they'll once say though, well, they are important. It wouldn't have been possible without their technology. But OB docs should decide. Last time I heard there would be a drawing of names of personnel involved in the project. We need to know soon." 09:30. Hospital administrators begin arriving on the maternity unit, followed by news teams with cameras to record the event. Claire spotted one ICE group setting up a live feed for the president to watch the harvest of his federal dollar investment. 10 o'clock. Claire and the OB team assembled in the specially appointed delivery room. Claire reached out her hand to touch the black velvet cloth covering the first ever placental incubator jar. Inside, the child stretched his body, filling the confines of his glass womb. 10:05. The administrator announced the beginning of the proceedings. "Claire Hope, RN, your name has been drawn to do the honors," as he whisked the cover, exposing the miracle jar. Claire had moved forward and she had a surgical hammer in hand, and she raised her arm back and with a hard hit, cracked open the jar. 10:07. Out plopped the baby boy, encased in placental caul. Claire stood back, watching the delivery room team take over, removing the caul, smacking his bottom, and cheering as the first Donald prototype screamed his anger. 10:10. The administrator called her forward. "Claire Hope, you had the honor of birthing the first Donald, one of many whose creation will serve the population, save the population crisis. You birthed him, he's yours. Congratulations, mother." "Not me," yelled Claire, running past people wanting to congratulate her on being the birth mother of a miracle child. "Not me. I won't be a mother." Claire charged up the steps, followed by cameras, and ICE ordering her to stop. The president wanted to congratulate her. Not me. I won't be a mother. My body, my choice, echoed as she plunged 16 stories down to the ground. 10:30, death by suicide, the certificate showed. She was a woman of her word, her colleagues said. No motherhood for her. Any questions?
No questions.
No questions? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gwynn. I'm going to be reading one of actually my first nonfiction pieces in the program. This is when I took Ella Ann's class for the first time, was part of our final. Coffee thoughts. Have you ever procrastinated so badly because you allowed your fear of failure to get in the way of things? Then proceed to talk yourself into it, but only if you do a specific task. Then after you decide on that task, you need to decide how you need to go about it. Yeah, I know. Right now, it's 4 in the morning on a Saturday, and I'm up to finish some work that's due soon. The fact that I am up this early means this work has to be important. But the stress sensors in my brain have forced me to put it off for as long as possible. It gives me every excuse in the book. It's not the right time. Do you feel too much pressure to do things today? Is the area you want to work in clean? Do you have the motivation? Oh, hold on, it made me lose my spot. Do you have the motivation? And so on. At this point, it's just plain self-sabotage. I could choose to lay here and allow my thoughts to swim about before coming to a decision. However, this isn't like the days from my undergrad years where I could wait until there's 7 hours before the submission time with all my notes already done and pop out nearly 10 pages of work. Still proud of that and gotta be. No, sadly, I need to take this seriously and actually start at a decent time. And I do. Instead of starting the day of, I start an entire day before. Yet, before I can set my thoughts free, whether that's on the page or simply out of the air, I need to make coffee. Now, I need to go through the long process of deciding on how I should make it. Iced coffee would put me in a fast working mood, but the motivation would deplete just as fast as the iced coffee. Now, I could do a mug of hot coffee since it would take me longer to drink and would keep me in a working mood, though anything warm relaxes me to the point I want to curl up and go to sleep. Plus, if I made iced coffee, I could just use instant, but if I do hot, then I can use my mocha pot. I think I know my choice. I go into the kitchen, take my time selecting a mug from my cabinet. Over half of the ones in the cabinet have to be excluded. Either they're not microwave safe or only made for ice drinks. I decide on the bright pastel one covered in scales with a mermaid tail for a handle. I fill the mug halfway and microwave it on high for 3 minutes. It's faster, so I can pretend I'm not letting my thoughts wander. I convince myself that I'm letting the mundane motions take me through the steps. I poured the piping hot water into the base of the mocha pot, being careful not to burn my hand on the now hot metal, and placed the metal coffee filter inside. My favorite grounds are next because how else am I supposed to be motivated without the best coffee in the world, black and bold? Lastly, I screw on the part that'll hold all that liquid magic. Now with my coffee brewed and sweetened, I can finally sit down with my laptop, coffee in hand, and stare at the blank Word document. With the blank page staring at me, all I can think is, can I really write a nonfiction piece? I wonder if all the other things I have written have just been beginner's luck, and I can't dish out anything worth reading. I've never cared for nonfiction and could only consume it in pieces to research on the topics centered around the historical fiction novels I read. Only recently have I started to become interested in what was always a boring genre. Now, my fear is that my nonfiction writings are just boring. I take a sip from my mug and try to swallow those thoughts down with my coffee. I can feel the warm liquid melt them away, and my creative mind starts to tingle. I can do this. I know I can. If I could, I would have given up a long time ago. Though I am wondering what it is that I can do. It's not like nonfiction is a monolith genre. There are many things I could write about. Memoirs seem easy enough, but how am I supposed to make my life so interesting that others will want to read it? Then there's the personal essay, but then I'll have to pick a specific topic and not something random. It has to be meaningful. I reach for the mermaid tail and take a drink from the scaly mug. I pondered the new thoughts as my body ponders the effects of caffeine. I could write a personal essay on coffee and how wonderful it is, though that doesn't make too much sense. I wouldn't even know where to start. How would I even start? Would it be with the process of making the coffee? Okay, there we go. My bad, it kept scrolling. Okay, how would I even start? Would it be with the process of making coffee? Of how on days when I take the time to slow down, I freshly grind the beans because it feels like I'm taking an extra step to take care of myself? Or would it be how I have to grab that instant coffee off the shelf on days I have to rush out the door, even when I don't have the time to even make coffee for myself? I could add in the time I made it to work early, only to realize I left my freshly made coffee at home. Instead of facing a day without coffee, I drove all the way home to get it. I arrived at work on time, but I wouldn't have cared if I was late. I wasn't teaching uncaffeinated. At the age of 28 and living in my own apartment, my mom still fussed at me about my mug and tumbler collection. I have to admit, I've had to put a stop to myself when it came to buying new seasonal Starbucks cups. Not only does my coffee need to taste great, but look great as well. It's all in the name of self-care. There are a few things I could mention about coffee, even the fact that I've had to cut back because of health concerns that are worsened by the caffeine, like migraines. But the doctors on the internet said it works wonders for asthma, so it's fine. Plus, I enjoy the motivational boost I get by working with a cup of coffee next to me. I feel like I'm able to do so much. Even now, as I reach for the mug and breathe in the sweet smell, I know exactly what to do. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Brandy Wilson, and I'm going to read, taking a little bit of a risk here and reading something that's brand spanking new, or pretty much anyway. Oh, I thought it broke. Happy Pride Month. I wore my leg just for this purpose. So one of my friends likes to give me titles and say, go write a story about it. And that's how this story began, but it's also a part of a collection that I'm working on. It's a collection of interlinked stories. So the characters repeat and come back and we see them at different points in their lives. And it all centers around a sort of community of lesbians in or around Memphis. So that is the setting. And the title of the story is Everyone Dies in a Knife Fight. Oh, and I should tell you too that it starts like, or I tried to make it start like a New York Times article on a wedding or a wedding announcement. You know how they do those articles about couples and they interview them and they go to the wedding. That's how it starts. So just in case you thought you were signing in for me to read the news article. All right, everyone dies in a knife fight. The brides wore white. Josephine Jo Sterling, 55, and Robin Caroline Witten, 52, insisted upon it. They'd earned it. I can't recall our first date, but I remember the first bird we both loved, recalls Robin. It was the tufted titmouse, dressed in snow, and we'd been watching them scrounge for the birdseed the neighbor kindly scattered for them. It was so brilliant and small and perfect against the stark white ground. Joe remembers everything else. We'd been together for the second time for just a few weeks, and we're deep into the honeymoon nesting phase, aided, of course, by that long snowstorm. She gave a chuckle, proudly lounging in her thick white suit, reminiscent of the luxury and flash of the king himself. We were in Memphis after all. Robin was all I saw until I saw that bird, but she still commanded my attention just like the first time I saw her. Joe brushed the stray hair from Robin's face and tucked it behind her ear. Large black and white feathers protruded from the flower arrangements that scaled the columns on Memphis's historic Hinsdale mansion. Inside, the feathers shot up like peacocks from the tables. It was fitting for these late-in-life bird lovers, newly reunited. No birds were harmed, Robin assured, a lilt in her voice, as she glided through the tables arm in arm with Joe. The first time around, the couple met at the famed Memphis lesbian bar, Madison's Flame, now closed, like most across the country. I'd just moved to town after living in a lesbian commune down in Mississippi for a few years. Miss Jo Sterling hails from Texas and earned a degree in political science from Texas Women's University in 1992. She has worked for the local co-op and has been a general gal about town, handywoman, and organizer for various LGBT organizations for decades. Miss Robin Whitten, former debutante and beauty pageant contestant from Macon, Georgia, was finishing a degree at the Memphis College of Art when she braved the club as a farce, she claims, on that fateful first meeting. But I knew right away Joe would be mine, she says with a wink to Joe. Miss Whitten has continued her pursuit of the arts with various showings about town. She also serves as a patron and supporter of arts and artistic endeavors in Memphis on various boards and charitable organizations. As guests descended upon the carefully manicured grounds of the mansion, Joe and Robin scurried up the staircase from which they would make their entrance together, as both sets of parents had passed within the last decade. Nevertheless, there was a large gathering of found family in support of the spectacle, couple. The truth is, no one could believe this wedding was even happening, including Joe. But she was sure she was doing the right thing. That's what she'd wanted all along, it must have been. And her suit was in fact custom made by the very same tailors that supposedly created Elvis's most iconic rose. Joe was proud of this, though she was only a sideline fan and not even a hometowner. I'd heard they were going to do a wedding at Graceland, Ashley said, a divorcee from Collierville, and Joe's most recent ex-girlfriend. She said this to her date, Joe's best friend, Head, who raised an eyebrow. They took a four-top table and were immediately served a round of champagne in flutes tinted a shade closest to a robin's breast that could be made into glass. The only place you can rent out there are blank metal buildings. Ashley nodded. Exactly. Seems more like a setting for a roller derby, or worse, some kind of gun show. Well, Ted grinned and motioned to the opulent sprays of flowers topped with feathers on the draped table before them. They laughed and welcomed another refill from the already circling caterware. Yes, the couple opted for the Hinsdale mansion, midtown adjacent after all, and much more in line with their vision of the nuptials. Robin was the visionary here. A low hum of classical strings drifted from an unobserved corner, and with the tables nearly full, it was growing harder to eavesdrop. Still, Ashley's clarinet-like voice could be made out from time to time, just a few feet away. It's like you brought a rubber hose to a knife fight, Ashley said, almost yelling. Het looked into the crowd. Everyone dies in a knife fight. They do? Ashley said. They do. That pretty much sums up this entire experience, Ashley said, tilting her chin towards Het. Het's face looked like putty. The experience of me or this wedding? Both. Ashley downed her champagne, gathered up her skirt, and headed to the bathroom. Venturing upstairs when she found the bottom floor had a line snaking through the corridor. When Ashley pushed through the heavy doors of the second floor bathroom, Robin stood at the sink, her wedding gown gathered up around her waist. Ashley's stomach plummeted. Oh, I'm sorry, the bathroom downstairs was full. Robin turned, smiled, dropped her gown, and reached out her hand to Ashley. You look amazing. You always do. Ashley softened. Thank you, she said, and took her hand. It was the handshake of a lesbian debutante, all fingers and firm. When she made to let go and find an open stall, Robin held on. Wait, Robin said, and tugged Ashley closer. Ashley tripped on her skirt, and Robin caught her arm, pulled her up, and kissed her right smack on the mouth. Robin, smiling, leaned back against the sink, reaching her hand onto the basin, proud as a peacock. A A switchblade, like something out of the pocket of one of the jets, lay open on the counter between them. Ashley laughed. What else could she do? What? We gonna rumble? Robin bit her lip. You won, Robin. You got her, Ashley said, turning to the mirror and brushing her hair back from her face, hoping this would somehow bolster Robin's ego enough to get her out of there. Robin didn't move, but watched Ashley in the mirror, a look Ashley couldn't quite place in her eyes. You have nothing to worry about with me. I have no desire to be where you are. I know, Robin said, her mouth turned down. You and I both know Joe is no prize to be won. Ashley put a hand on her hip, shifting away. Why do you have a fucking knife, Robin? Robin stepped in as if to kiss her again, but Ashley gently pushed her hand up to stop her. Look, Robin, what's between you and Joe is none of my business, but maybe it's not, let's not complicate things. You're about to get married, right? No, I mean, yes, but I wanted to marry her 15 years ago. So what? You want to make out with me to somehow get back at her right now? I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Fuss? Robin wrapped her hand around the knife, like her constantly talking about her. She picked up the knife and waved it around as she spoke, as if it were merely an extension of her hand. Flirting with you, calling you to ask for your blessing for us? Ashley backed towards the door, inching it open. Where the fuck was Head? Joe? Why the hell didn't she just go to wait in the goddamn line? Why did she even come to this thing? The crisp autumn air drifted in through the open doors and as each guest entered till they were all seated. It was a fall wedding, a Halloween wedding, but not so tacky as to have a costume ball, and respectively on the 26th, the weekend before. But of course, there was a scream, and then the music changed, and the brides descended the staircase, declared a lady. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. To give you a brief rundown of what my thesis was, it was a novel split into 3 sections. The first section followed Telemachus, a merman. He had lost his memory and doesn't know why his father had outcasted him since he was young, until mystical beings visit and tell him to leave home. So it follows his journey of leaving home for the first part of the book. The second part follows Eirik, a Selkie who is cursed to be stuck in his leopard seal body for all but one day of the year, along with the rest of his pod. He is a fated Selkie, so he is the one meant to break this curse, and it follows his journey. These two eventually meet, and that's where I'll start my reading for tonight. This is one of the many pieces of art that I did for it. So I did 36 pieces of art roughly. Each section had its own piece of art, along with each chapter page had a piece of art. So this is the section art piece for the section I will be reading tonight. Chapter 30, Meeting by Chance. Crash, bang, crackle. Surtur, is that you? Nick says as she runs over to Surtur, full of excitement and energy. Nix crashes into Surtur, giving him an enormous hug, much to Surtur's dismay, as he looks absolutely baffled about this new situation. Nix, what are you doing here? Surtur says as he looks over to Eric and Telemachus, who are now strewn about on the floor, as when the 2 dimensions clashed together, it threw everything inside of them around. Before turning back to Nix, are you running some trials as well right now? Surtur asks as Nix hugs him tightly, not letting go. Tap, tap, tap. Can you let me go now? Surtur asks as he taps Nix back with his clawed hand. Come on, Nix. You know that I don't love physical contact like this, Surtur says, his monotone voice finally breaking. Well, all of this is absolutely horrifying, Eirik says, looking at the bubble that is now a mixture of crimson bubbles, blackness, and constellations swirling around him in a nauseating and dizzying pattern. What is up with those two? And who is that girl? Eric thinks to himself as he watches Surtur and Nyx greet one another. And what's up with Surtur? His voice sounds all normal now. Was he really that bored of me? Eric mumbles inaudibly. Huh? Telemachus says as he turns to Eric. Telemachus follows Eric's gaze to see what he is looking at. As he follows Eric's gaze, he looks at the bubble, mist, and constellation mix and takes it in for the very first time. I don't know. It's kind of pretty, Telemachus says while still looking at the swirling bubbles for a few minutes. Or maybe not. I think I'm gonna be sick, Telemachus says, closing his eyes and turning his head away from where he had been staring, trying his best not to start dry heaving. I thought this whole trial thing was going to be a solo project, Telemachus says as he opens his eyes to look at Eric. Huh? Holy crap, who are you? What did you say? Eric says, fumbling through his words as he turns to look at Telemachus for the first time. And who are you? Eric asks Telemachus as their gaze meet for the first time. Flash, simmer, flash. Eric looks at Telemachus. He remembers his dream of the strange man and the baby. Why does this man kind of look like that baby? Eric thinks to himself as he shakes his head, trying to get the thought out of his mind. I am still trying to figure out how to escape this, Eric then says as his eyes dart around the room, trying to avoid looking too closely at Telemachus. Well, my name's Telemachus, Telemachus says as he stretches out his hand towards Eric, who doesn't even seem to notice it, especially since Telemachus is sitting a good distance away from Eric. I'm asking if you thought the trials were a solo thing, just going through these trials with the gods, Telemachus says, still looking at Eric and how his eyes were darting around the room. Trust me, you can't get out, Telemachus says, trying to get Eric to focus on him. Huh? What do you mean? There's always a back door or some sort of escape route, right? At least in Dad's stories, there was always a way out of a situation. Unless fate had something to do with the situation. Then there really is no way out of it, Eric says, his eyes still darting around the room, all the while thinking about home and how he can't escape his own fate. Swimming up to Eric, Telemachus grabs Eric's head, forcing Eric to look him in the eyes as he talks. Even if you get out and land in oblivion, you will still be tied to the channel, and you won't be able to swim away. Trust me, I tried, Telemachus says, sternly looking deep into Eric's eyes until he can tell that Eric has gotten the message through his thick skull. As Telemachus continues to stare at Eric, Eric's eyes seem to glaze over and lose some of their light. Well, I'm going to die then, Eric says, letting his body go limp, which pulls his face out of Telemachus's hands. Telemachus just lets go of Eric, not wanting to force Eric to stay in the same position he didn't want to be there in, which allows Eric to begin floating meaninglessly around the bubble room. Telemachus swims alongside Eric as he floats around. Is this your first trial then? Telemachus asks as he pushes Eric's body hard to keep him away from Surtur and Nyric's conversation. Well, it looks like they are enjoying their reunion, Telemachus thinks as he notices Surtur with his arms outstretched, keeping Nyx from hugging him again and still chatting away with one another. Huh? No, I passed the first test by some miracle. The answer just blurted itself out of me. Okay, gonna move on to chapter 31 now. Chapter 31, A New Room. Both Telemachus and Eric wake up in a large room that has trees, grass, and all sorts of other plant life. As the two wake up, Eric sits up as if it's second nature. His arms are long and outstretched as he looks down at his toes in front of him. On the other hand, Telemachus bends and twists and struggles before being able to push off of the floor and sit up, obviously struggling to sit up in the new waterless room. Blink, 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 blink. Telemachus and Eirik blinks in the blinding light. Takes a few minutes for the two to adjust to the new light of the room. Gone are the dark constellations and bright bubbles. Instead, the room is filled with a blinding white light from a single sun hanging high off of the right-hand side of the two. Ugh, that's bright, Eirik mumbles as he wakes up from a sudden sleep he had fallen into. How long was I asleep? Eirik thinks to himself as he rubs his eyes, trying to adjust to the new light. As he pulls his hands slowly away from his eyes, the light is still bright. He stares at them hard. What? How? Was I asleep for a year? Eirik slowly sputters out, looking at his human hands, flipping back and forth, looking at the palms, then the top of his hands over and over again. What about the stone? Eirik mumbles, looking at his forearms. What the? Eirik starts as he looks to where his crescent moon birthmark should be. But it's different now. Eirik traces the dark crescent that is now paired with a shimmering partial circle. The two together now make a full moon. Huh? Eirik says, looking back and forth from his hands to his forearms. Eirik is so distracted by this change, he does not see Surtur and Nyx leaning up against a tree. Hack, hack, hack. As Telemachus wakes up, he tries to take a deep breath to calm himself from the panic that was starting to set in as he fell asleep. But he is struggling, causing him to grab at his neck and his sides, feeling for his gills. Fuck, 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 he thinks to himself as he rubs his eyes to look at his side. Where are they? Where are they? Where are they? His mind screams as his vision comes into focus, and he notices his side is smooth, no scales, no gills, nothing. Hack, hack, hack. Telemachus's hacking and full-blown panic attack draws Eirik's attention away from himself and over towards Telemachus. What is he doing? Eirik thinks to himself as he stares and watches Telemachus as he pats his sides and his neck repeatedly, all the while coughing and hacking. Can he not breathe? Eirik thinks as he continues to watch Telemachus. Oh, Eirik explains, you had gills, didn't you? Eirik asks, touching Telemachus' shoulder. Nod, nod, nod. Telemachus nods quickly as he stares at Eirik with panic-filled eyes. All the while, Telemachus' face has begun to turn dark red. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. Eirik chuckles to himself as he leans forward, putting his pointer, middle, and ring fingers on Telemachus' chin, gently pulling it down, opening his mouth. Now, suck in as if you're saying the word how. Slowly, then push the air out as if you're saying the word did. Slowly, Eirik says, while still holding down Telemachus' chin. After a while, Telemachus' face went back to its normal color. Better? Eirik asks, trying not to laugh at Telemachus. Asfuka. Telemachus mumbles gibberish in an airy tone, as he is still holding his mouth open. This time, Eirik couldn't hold it in and begins to laugh, pulling his hand away from Telemachus' chin and grabbing his own stomach. He almost starts to roll around as he barrels over in laughter. Even his eyes begin to fill with tears as the laughter seems to only get worse. Telemachus continues to sputter out, still keeping his mouth open as if Eirik never removed his fingers from his chin, causing Eirik to double over even further in laughter. What's so funny? Telemachus thinks to himself. How do I go about talking now that I have to breathe through my mouth? Telemachus continues to think as he calms down now that he can breathe. Talk as you normally would, just remember the in and out, Eric says with an enormous smile on his face, as he has never been good at something before. How did you know how to do this? Telemachus asks between breaths. Eric, trying to hold back his laughter again, says, "Our people come onto land in human bodies once a year." After a brief pause, Eric continues, "I thought you would know how to do this since you're half human and all," Eric says, panning down to look where Telemachus's tail should be, before quickly turning his head to look at his own legs, seeing that his coat is draped over his lap. Eric sighs before turning to look over to Telemachus. Keeping his gaze up towards the ceiling. This is your first time on land, correct?" Eric asks, trying to keep Telemachus from seeing the red on his cheeks. Yeah, we were not allowed to go topside as we would burn," Telemachus says as he is figuring out how to breathe properly. Okay, Surtur, are you there?" Eric calls out with a sound of worry filling his voice. "Yeah, we're here, just waiting for you two boys to be ready for the next trial," Surtur says with the most emotion he's had this entire time. "Okay, well, damn, what are they called? Surtur, can you summon the things that cover the lower half of our bodies, or perhaps an outfit, just a coat, or what his name is again would be good," Eric asks, sounding a bit embarrassed. "What? Oh, yeah, I forgot. Humans like to wear those," Surtur says with a bit of a giggle. "Here," Surtur says as a pair of old worn-out shorts fell on Eric's lap. Eric thanks Surtur before he turns to Nix and says, "Hey, Nix, your guy needs the bottom covers that humans wear." "Huh?" Nix says, bringing her gaze down to look at Eric and Telemachus. "Oh, yeah, they do need those," Nix says with a giggle before dropping down a pair of worn-out trousers on Telemachus's legs, which he in turn examines with curiosity. Eric drapes his coat over his right shoulder and asks Surtur, "Can I have some rope?" "Huh? Why?" Surtur asks. Eric points to the seal pelt that is his coat, just dangling off his right shoulder, and says, "To tie my coat down so that it's easy to move around." Sure, I guess," Surtur says in his monotone voice as an old frayed rope drops at Eric's feet. "Thank you," Eric says as he picks up the rope and ties the rope around his waist, holding his coat in place so that it doesn't move around too much, and he begins to move towards Telemachus, who is struggling to put on the pants. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. Eric chuckles as he says, "Here, let me help you with that," grabbing the pants from Telemachus, lining up each foot with each pant leg while Telemachus is sitting down. Now put each foot," Eric says while tapping Telemachus's feet, "in the hole that I lined up, then pull up," Eric says as he guides Telemachus's hands through the waistline to pull the pants to waistline of the pants to help him pull up the pants while still sitting down. Eric also does his best to keep his gaze on Telemachus's feet, only looking up when he has to, and every time he feels his cheeks heat up with embarrassment seeing Telemachus naked. "Thank you," Telemachus says, all the while thinking, "Why is his face so red? Is something wrong with him? Is he sick or something?" Telemachus mutters as the pants go over his waist. "These are uncomfortable," Telemachus says to Eric. "Eric, I know," Eric says with a pause. "I really don't want to get too far into it, but unlike our other forms, we need to wear these at the bare minimum," Eric says as he thinks. I don't know how to explain all this to him. Was he always so fit? Eric continues to think as he notices how muscular Telemachus's torso is. "Now, let's work on standing," Eric says as he stands up and reaches a hand out to Telemachus. Don't we need to push them into the next trial? Surtur asks as he watches Eirik and Telemachus. Isn't there a time crunch here? He continues, trying not to laugh as he watches Telemachus learn how to stand with Eirik's help. I think it's fine, Nyx says with a giggle as she watches Telemachus fall on top of Eirik and Eirik's face turn bright red as a result. I've never dealt with anything like this before. Anyways, so who knows? She continues. But usually, Surtur starts to say, usually what? This is all unprecedented. We're in control, aren't we? Nyx says, looking over to Surtur, who looks a bit worried. I guess so, but no more than a day, Surtur says as he turns to look back at Nyx. Giggle, giggle, giggle. Okay, 24 hours, Nyx says as she looks back to the boys where Eirik is teaching Telemachus to learn how to walk. Chapter 32, Upcoming Trials. It's been 24 hours. Are you two ready to start the last trial, Nyx says as she stands up from the ground around the base of the tree. Ugh, she groans as she begins to stretch out her arms and back. Eventually, she walks over to Surtur, who is lying on the ground next to the tree. Ow, Surtur shouts as Nyx kicks him in the shin. Oh, come on, I barely even hit you, Nyx says, putting her hands on her hips as she stares down at Surtur. Okay, I'm up, Surtur says as he pushes himself up off the ground. Let me have my fun. It's been what? How many thousands of years since we got to hang out? You so rarely come hang out with all the other gods, Nyx says before turning to Telemachus and Eirik with a smile and a slight giggle. Both of you seem acclimated now. Are you ready for the next trial? Eirik and Telemachus look at each other before saying yes, with as much gusto as they can, turning back to Surtur and Nyx. Good, Surtur says as he walks over to a small bowl that has begun to grow out of the ground in front of the tree near where the two deities were resting. Once the bowl and pedestal finish forming, Surtur asks Nyx, have you ever done this trial with two participants before? Nope, but it should work the same way, Nyx says, approaching the bowl. So let's do it together then, she says as she stuck her hand out to the line up with Surtur's hand over the bowl. Wait, you mean this is going to be the first time you've done this? Like, I get that doing the riddle thing together was new too, but what is this? Are you sure this is okay to do together? It seems a lot more complicated, Telemachus asks, reaching out and trying to walk to Nyx as if he can stop her. Ow, Telemachus says as he jams his fingers into an invisible wall. The third trial has started, and you may not approach, Surtur says in an uncharacteristically stern voice. But what's up with the wall? Eirik asks as he moves next to Telemachus, who is now rubbing his jammed finger. And how does this thing work? Eirik continues to ask as he places his hand on the invisible wall. We have tested you on your base knowledge of which you both have passed, Nyx says, ignoring Eirik's question and turns her right hand that is over the bowl vertical, then puts her left hand out in front of her with the palm facing up. We tested your ability to work together, which is individualized to the two of you, Surtur says, turning his left hand vertically and placing it on top of Nyx's hand, then putting his left hand out in front of him, his palm facing up. Now we must test your heart and resolve, both Surtur and Nyx say at the same time as an ornate dagger comes out of the palms of their hands. What are you doing? Eirik asks, pushing up against the invisible wall. Yeah, what's happening? Telemachus asks, joining Eirik in pushing on the invisible wall. Ignoring all their questions, Surtur cuts from the bottom of Nyx's palm to the top of his own, allowing Nyx's free-flowing silver blood to fall into the bowl first, then his own thick black blood mixed with the silver entering the bowl below. Nyx also ignores their questions, then cuts the top of Surtur's palm to the bottom of her own, allowing Surtur's thick black blood to mix with her own free-flowing silver blood, creating 2 lines of blood to drip into the bowl below. As their blood mixes, both Irik and Telemachus are beginning to banging at the invisible wall. The 2 left their hands over the pot until their hands healed. You could have told us you self-healed at record pace, Telemachus shouts as Irik fell to the floor. Finally, Nyx and Surtur drop their ornate daggers into the pot, causing it to spark and produce a large white flame. You may join us over here now, Nyx announces as both Irik and Telemachus are skeptical of the situation now. Even so, the 2 begin to approach the bowl slowly. This isn't going to be another question, is it? Irik asks. Neither Surtur nor Nyx says a word. Instead, Surtur grabs Irik's hand by the wrist, and Nyx grabs Telemachus by the wrist. Wait, you're not going to, Telemachus starts as he is hushed by Nyx's stare. Going to what? Irik asks Surtur with Nyx to force Irik's and Telemachus's hands into the flame. What? Both Telemachus and Irik start before an ornate dagger is shoved through their hands, causing them to scream as their own blood drips into the bowl. As the daggers leave their palms, they heal, leaving a dark orange spot on both of their hands. Why do I have an orange spot on my hand now? Telemachus asks, ripping his hand out of Nyx's grasp, and walks to the middle of the room, wanting to get away from the bowl. Yes, why did we have to get stabbed while you 2 only got a small cut? Irik asks, also walking to the middle of the room. Irik reaches out to Telemachus, causing the orange spots to line up as they stand together. Suddenly, a dark orange mist envelops them. Good luck, Nyx says with a voice that is worried but is also trying to give the best encouraging good luck she has in her. Have you ever seen, Surtur begins, saying as Irik and Telemachus are swallowed by the mist and can no longer move. Is this oblivion then? Irik asks, worried. No, I don't think so, Nyx says. You can't interact with others in oblivion. Then what do you think it is? Irik asks as he begins panicking and hyperventilating. Maybe the trials were inconclusive, Telemachus says, grabbing Irik's hand as the orange dots touch a bright orange light engulfs them. End of book 1.
What inspired these characters in the story?
So for Irik and Telemachus, I really wanted to mess around with different family dynamics. So Telemachus has been outcasted by his father and essentially his pod for something he doesn't remember. And that's created a very negative family dynamic of isolation. While Irik, being as special as he is, since he's the fated selfie, while loved by his family, he still feels the isolation because he is that fated being that they've all been waiting years for. And then for Surtur and Nyx, they are gods, basically, that just they do these general trials through the crevasse that they have been sucked into. And this crevasse, you don't really know too much about it. It's just meant to help guide the 2 together before going on to this new world that they're going to meet in the second book.
Are there societal dynamics that are parallel to what happens in reality or what happens in like in American society or international?
Not really. So I messed around with how do I put this? So instead of focusing on building a society, I focused on building them as individuals. They travel alone for the first like 2/3 of the book. So they don't interact with anything except these beings, such as a Chinese sea serpent. Irik was swallowed by a cabal, which is basically a giant whale at one point. But they don't really build any form of society.
Thank you for your reading. What inspired the names?
So for Telemachus, I wanted to kind of like flip it on its head. So Telemachus is obviously Odysseus's son. And Odysseus has this great love for his family, but I wanted to flip it where Telemachus didn't have this love for the father because they didn't put this in the book, but his mother died because of him. So because of that loss of love for that, it caused tension between Telemachus and his father, and that's what caused the isolation. Eventually, they'll get back and fix things with the help of building familial bonds between Telemachus and Irik together. But that happens in later books. Yes.
It sounds like it's a whole bunch of mythologies together.
Yes.
Or what are your favorite ones that you pull from?
So I love specifically like Greek and Celtic mythology the most. So that's why my two characters follow more towards Greek and Celtic mythology. But I also kind of started introducing my own mythology with new gods and whatnot. So they don't know it yet, but they're like seeking this god called Proteus, who's gonna basically be this be all god, the head god, kind of replacing Zeus.
And that's my question. I was gonna ask, what your decision to bring together Selkie, which is Celtic and Greek mythology, and what other mythologies you were tapping into besides those two.
So I tap in some Asian mythology there with Chinese sea serpents, and I tap in some Icelandic with the Cabal.
Thank you, Alasdair, and all our other readers. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again tomorrow night.